joining us today for Understanding Disinhibition Behaviors. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our conference partners, MLX and David Amundsen, and our Diamond sponsor, Oracle, as well as our donors and supporters for making this free conference possible. To help us continue to provide educational programming like this, please consider making a donation. Your gift will assist the Tourette Association in continuing to provide support and resources to the Tourette and tic disorder community. Please visit tourette.org/donate to make a contribution today. During today's session, we would be very happy to hear from you and include your voice in the conversation. You may ask questions or share comments using the question pane on the right side of your GoTo website at any time. We will collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Kathy Giordano.
Hi, I hope this is working. We will be talking about understanding disinhibition and difficult behaviors. Next. Again, next. So this is my son who was diagnosed at the age of 5, and I like to start things off with this because I love the quote, "Every adult needs a child to teach. It's how we adults learned." I learned a ton from Matthew, raising him. He's now 36. And one of the things that I learned later on, I didn't learn it until I think he was into being a teenager, was about disinhibition. And so I want to share how important that is. I've been doing presentations for about 30 years, and I believe that understanding disinhibition is the key to understanding Tourette and to helping kids at home and in the school setting. Next. So why is this important? We discipline the kids, and too often we discipline for symptoms. So if we understand disinhibition, we're going to understand more the difference between what's a symptom and what's age-appropriate behavior that probably does need to be disciplined. Disciplining really can backfire and end up in anger and rage. It's much easier for us as parents and teachers to remain calm when we recognize that the behaviors are not purposeful and that they are part of the disorder. When we ask students and children what we can do when they're losing their emotional regulation, they say stop talking. And so it's easier to do that if we know that the behavior we're seeing is part of the disorder. Next. And it's important in school. I believe everybody in the school should know about Tourette because it only takes one cafeteria worker or one teacher to say the wrong thing that can backfire and end up in a bad situation. Unfortunately, a lot of times in school, the behaviors are punished. And so with awareness, there's a lot less punishment, a lot less detentions, suspensions, expulsions. We have found that bullying is reduced, and there's much more likelihood to have support both academically and socially. Understanding disinhibition, if you have a manifestation determination meeting, please go into the meeting able to feel confident that you can describe disinhibition, either that or email me and I can kind of help walk through it. Okay, next. So disinhibition. Rose Woods wrote a book a while back, and Disability of Disinhibition, and she uses the Y instead of an I, so D-Y-S rather than D-I-S, because she feels that's important, that it really highlights the fact that it's medical and not just a kid being oppositional. So she says a condition in people with primary neurological disorders that limit a person's ability to use his inhibitory process and learned inhibitory skills. It's so important that we understand that the kids know right from wrong. They want to do what's right, but in the moment they are not able to use their learned inhibitory skills. So in the moment they're not able to inhibit what they really know that they should be inhibiting. And it can end up in movements, behaviors, comments, infantile behavior, noises. I mean, you name it, it can end up in it. Next. Oh, I want to say that contextual and non-contextual. A lot of people think that it's not a symptom if it's in context. Not true. The disinhibition can be in context or totally out of context. I looked up the medical definition for disinhibition, and it says it's actions which seem, even in medical definition, seem tactless, rude, or even offensive. They occur when people don't follow the social rules about when or what to say or do. And I love this. Disinhibition behaviors can place enormous strain on families. And I included providers and educators because it can put an enormous strain on everyone, including the child with Tourette. Next. So this, I'm used to be an English teacher, so I delve into a little bit of science here because it's so important. Back when Matt was diagnosed over 35 years ago, a lot of things have changed, but one thing that has stayed consistent is that they knew the basal ganglia was impacted and they knew that dopamine was involved. And it's so important. The basal ganglia are associated with a variety of functions, including control of voluntary movement, speech, and emotions. And if you look carefully, the basal ganglia chooses which actions to perform in the moment. So it's the basal ganglia that really controls whether you're able to inhibit or whether you're not able to inhibit. So it's the basal ganglia that is the base of the disinhibition. And it's curious to me that it's right next to the cerebral cortex, which is impacted a lot by kids with Tourette and impacts their planning and their thought and a lot of behaviors and stuff. Next. So this is just, maybe it'll help you remember that the disinhibition, it's leaky brakes, it's inconsistent, it's in the moment they aren't able to inhibit. The Canadian Tourette Association has some really good information on leaky brakes. Next. So it's important too to understand the difference between disinhibition and impulsivity. So again, I will repeat this. Disinhibition, inconsistent ability to inhibit behaviors. The person knows right from wrong, but can't inhibit in the moment. And it's neurological because it's based on the basal ganglia. Impulsivity is responding quickly before thinking. Again, they know right from wrong, but you just act without thinking. It's like kind of like the Dennis the Menace thing. By the time I thought about whether I should or I shouldn't, I already did. Next. So some examples, impulsivity would be like jumping out of the car and running across the street, jumping out without thinking that this could be a dangerous thing. Touching hot food to see if it's really done, and then, burning yourself. Whereas disinhibition, I knew a person that every time the person was in a airport, he had to say, "I've got a bomb." Now, this was an adult, an intelligent, kind, wonderful adult, but the thought got in his head and he wasn't able to continually inhibit it. And so he had to say it, which I'm sure you can understand caused a great deal of problems. Slamming the door over and over until it sounds right. I know I shouldn't be slamming the door, but I can't stop myself from doing it. Saying shut up. A little girl I was working with in 4th grade, the teacher called me and said, okay, this is not Tourette, because every time I say we have homework, she says, shut up. And I said to the teacher, I said, well, see, everybody else in the class is thinking shut up or worse. They're able to inhibit. This little girl, because of her Tourette, isn't able to inhibit in the moment. Next. So I also looked up the definition of behaviors because behaviors, the knee-jerk reaction is it's bad. So what are the kids' behaviors? And the first thing you think of is that it's bad. But the dictionary, the way in which one acts or conducts himself, especially toward others. So waving at a friend, hugging a loved one, doing a webinar, listening to a webinar, that's all behaviors. The way in which an animal or person acts in response to the environment or a stimulus. So laughing at a joke is a behavior. Buying a cup of coffee is a behavior. Some schools actually have gotten to the point where they are trying to eliminate the word behavior and instead using response or actions or symptoms because they don't, those words don't immediately elicit the fact that the kid is bad. Next. So here's unfortunately what we do. Why do you keep doing that when I've told you not to? And lots of times, a child will respond with, I don't know, or my brain makes me do it. A lot of kids have said, it's like a voice in my head that keeps telling me to do it. And unfortunately, I've seen where that ends up, too many people think of schizophrenia. It's not schizophrenia, it's just the disinhibition. They don't want to do it, but they just have to do it. And the kids don't know why they have to do it. They can't say, well, the dopamine and my basal ganglia kind of got in the way. And very frequently, kids will apologize. Next. So why is it important to understand disinhibition and challenging behaviors? Dr. Ross Green, if you're not familiar with Dr. Ross Green, I highly recommend him. His website is Lives in the Balance. He is a doctor that really gets it, and he's able to explain things really well. And one of the statements I heard a long time ago, I think Matt was about 8 or 9, went to his presentation and he said, it's your explanation of the behavior that leads directly to how you respond to it. It's our explanation of the behavior that leads directly to how we respond to it. So is our explanation that the kid's doing it on purpose to make me angry, or is our explanation that that's just part of the disinhibition and maybe we need to figure out how to do this differently? Next. Once upon a time, a man whose axe was missing suspected his neighbor's son. The boy walked like a thief, looked like a thief, and spoke like a thief. But the man found his axe while digging in the valley, and the next time he saw his neighbor's son, the boy walked, looked, and spoke like any other child. It's our explanation that leads directly to how we respond to it. Next. So disinhibition can impact co-occurring challenges as well, the co-occurring disorders. So obsessive compulsive disorder can be impacted. I just need to keep touching this. I need to keep jumping. I need to keep doing this. I know I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I just have to do it right now. Sensory issues. I need to touch this. I know I'm not supposed to run into the wall, but I need that sensory input. Tics, their urges. So tics are like an itch that's hard to inhibit. Disinhibition can impact anger, silliness, rage, blurting out, name calling, and repeating what other people say. It really can impact all of Tourette. And recognizing disinhibition as a major component of Tourette makes it so much easier for us to be able to work positively with a child. Next. So what's not helpful? I'll get to what's helpful in a second, but what typically is not helpful? We as adults and we as teachers, we like to help the kid learn how to behave appropriately. So what do? We give suggestions. We remind them. But unfortunately, symptoms and behaviors, particularly for kids with Tourette, are suggestible. So once we say something, don't do that, we've put it in their head, and now it's hard for them to inhibit. An example, I was with a friend of mine the other day, and we were standing in a parking lot talking at 6 feet apart. And all of a sudden, her eyes got big, and she said, "Don't look now, but here comes Sandy, and boy, I can't believe what she's doing." It was so hard for me to not turn around and look, because she had put the idea in my head, which made it harder for me to inhibit not looking. There was a teacher that I was working with, and she would tell the kid, now remember, don't touch the fire alarm. Well, she then made it harder for him not to touch the fire alarm. My personal problem is wet paint. If I see a sign that says wet paint, I have to touch it just to make sure that it really is wet. So try to do something different than telling them not to do it. And I got some suggestions next. Next slide. Yeah. So how can we help? Try to avoid making assumptions. Boy, do we make assumptions. Especially for kids with Tourette. They look like typical kids, and lots of times they're very bright. So he's smart. He knows what he's doing. That's an assumption. She's purposely being sarcastic. No, not necessarily. He's just being lazy. Instead, please be curious. Is this a response that is typical of the kid's personality? So you got this nice kid, and all of a sudden he shouts out, you're fat. Is that typical of the personality, or is it a disinhibition thought? Have I attempted to ask her why this occurs? We need to talk to the kids more. And again, they're not going to say, well, my basal ganglia, but they may say something, they may give us a clue why it's happening, what's going on, so that we can try to help them. Pay attention to anxiety. I love this. The minute anxiety arises, intelligence closes to search for anything that will relieve the anxiety. So disinhibition is going to pop out. Next. Rick Lavoie has a wonderful demonstration that I do when I do my presentations, but basically it's talking about our emotional vase. And we all have emotional vases and anxiety vases. So we wake up in the morning, the anxiety vase is pretty empty, pretty low. And as the day goes on, it may get higher and higher. As adults, we have learned ways to, okay, I feel my anxiety is increasing. I need to go for a walk. I need to go get a drink of water. I need to do something to reduce my anxiety. Kids need to learn this too. They're not going to know it naturally. So what can we do to help the anxiety vase from overflowing? Because once the anxiety overflows, it's not usually a good reaction. Helping the kids recognize, okay, when does your vase get 75% full, and what helps reduce it? Next. Definitely one of the things that is really important for kids to help minimize the need to inhibit is to support them, encourage their talents, encourage their interests, whether it be architecture, chess, playing the drums, drama, singing, science. Most kids with Tourette do have an interest. Most do have something that they can do fairly well. And so kids with Tourette, they really, really are stressed and have a lot of anxiety and have a lot of mountains to climb. But if they know in their heart that they're really good at being on stage or really good at science, it can help so much. Next. It's so important to encourage their strengths and their talents because it balances out over time. So if we pay attention, if our only focus is the difficulties, and trust me, kids know what their difficulties are. Kids know where their skills lie. Well, no, they don't necessarily know where the skills lie, but they always know where their skills don't lie. They always know where they fall down. They always know what their difficulties are. So if our whole focus is on focusing on the difficulties, the kid is very unbalanced. However, if we focus on the strengths, then it can be a more balanced situation for the child, a much happier, the self-esteem. But we need to do it as adults. We need to support what their talents are. Next, I think. Yeah. So with Matthew, probably some of you know that he's an amazing drummer. Well, Matthew had severe Tourette, very, very, very significantly impacting his life and our life. But he started drumming about at the age of 2, and he was so good at drumming. I mean, he would drum on anything. And so then we got him like a little play set, and he got to be really good. And my husband and I, who are not musical, brought him to the lead percussionist of the Rochester Philharmonic to see if she would be willing to accept him as a student. He was 7 years old at the time, and she did accept him as a student. And his drumming is just phenomenal. But what people would tell us, because his rage was so out of line and his behavior sometimes, his symptoms were so significant, people would tell us that if he's being naughty, that we should take the drums away, or if he had a bad week, we shouldn't let him go to drum lessons. I just thought that was the stupidest advice. Matthew had a tough life. The drumming was the one thing that he really excelled at. And I wasn't going to take that away from him. So we never used it as a carrot. You know, if you're good, you can play your drums. And we never used it as a threat that if you don't practice your drums, then you can't do this. And as an adult, he has been on quite a few documentaries. I mentioned the 75 watts because a lot of families have watched it and shown their kids, and it's been pretty encouraging for a lot of kids and the parents. And also, he just he videotaped some virtual interactive drum circles. So I include this particularly now, since so many of us are isolated and so many kids are isolated. So if you click on this site, he has drum circles and he talks to the camera. So he's including the child, he's including your child. There are other people. It's fun, it's relaxing, and a lot of kids, for whatever reason, like drumming. Next. So the Tourette Association has a lot of resources. Go to the website. The Educator's Guide is fabulous. We hand it out at all the conferences, the education conferences we go to, and we've gotten very good responses from people that have used it. So, but we do have a lot of information. And next. We also offer a lot of support. So we do in-services for educators, we do team meetings, and we can do all these things virtually too. So if you're having difficulties in school, please don't hesitate to call us, whether you're a parent or an educator. We have information. I've been the education specialist for the Tourette Association for almost 16 years now. We now also have Wendy Wegman. She was an elementary teacher, so and she's a parent. So we can give information not only as a parent, but also as a professional, and also as people that have a lot of information about Tourette. So please don't hesitate to use us. Next. Okay.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for an excellent presentation despite our technical difficulties. As a reminder to everyone, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your control panel. And if we're unable to get to everyone's question, we have a full-time information or referral staff who can answer your questions, as well as by emailing support@tourette.org or calling 1-888-4-TOURETTE. So we do have some great questions for
Okay, I just want to add. I wanted to add that I know this is a complicated topic. So if you do have information, or if you want to even talk to me on the phone, just email me, Kathy.Giordano@Tourette.org, and we can talk. I can give you more information about disinhibition, or we can talk about specific situations.
Great. So the first question we have is, can you explain what you mean by managing symptoms instead of controlling or stopping them?
Yeah, a lot of people, will talk about, well, he just needs to control the symptoms. Well, that's like you need to control your hiccups, or, control your sneezing. We can manage a sneeze. So it's different than controlling or stopping. Controlling and stopping makes everybody think that it's purposeful. If you can control it, then it's purposeful. And unfortunately, the way Tourette is with the inconsistencies, it oftentimes looks like they can control it. So that lots of times you'll see symptoms decrease when they're in a science lab. It's a hands-on, they like science. And it will increase in English class because they can't write and their anxiety is up. So managing the symptoms is so much more important than thinking about controlling them or stopping them. It's neurological. It's the basal ganglia. You can't control your basal ganglia, but you can learn how to manage. There was this one boy, this wonderful woman out in Arizona. I think I was talking to her, and she was working with a boy, and he had to touch women's breasts, which obviously this is something that needs to be managed. This is something that you can't ignore. So what he and this woman came up with is when he had the urge, and remember, it's all about urges. So how do we manage the urge? So when he had the urge to touch a woman, he would, what worked was he would put his hands behind his back and clasp his hands behind his back. And that helped him manage the symptom. He wasn't really able to stop it or control it, but that helped him manage it. And I think the word manage is so important that we use, so that we get away from thinking that you can stop it or you can control it, because you can't. Hopefully we can learn to manage symptoms that need to be managed. Not all symptoms need to be managed. Most symptoms can be ignored, but there are those that do need to be managed.
Okay, great. Our next question is, does this mean a child never has difficult behaviors or symptoms?
I'm sorry, you cut out. What say it again?
Does this mean a child never has consequences for difficult behaviors or symptoms?
No. I do hear from people sometimes that will say, well, we can't do anything about it because it's a symptom. Well, going back to this kid that had to touch women's breasts, yeah, that was a symptom. But we can't just say, oh, well, it's a symptom, so we can't do anything about it. We have to try to come up with some strategies. And let me see if I can think of another example. Managing things in school rather than controlling or stopping. So there was a young man that was in 9th grade, and he was by the end of the day he was in a class that his symptoms were off the wall, and he became very disruptive in the classroom. Now, could he stop them or control them? No. But what they learned to do is they allowed him to sit right next to the door. And when he felt his anxiety vase, when he felt that he was going to explode, he had permission to leave the classroom and go get a drink of water. And just by doing that, that helped him manage his symptoms rather than stop or controlling them.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how do we tell if a behavior is due to a symptom or just age-appropriate behaviors?
Yeah, I wish I had a really good answer for that. I think what you try to do is, again, you get to know the kid. Is this representative of who he is? Because yeah, kids do need consequences. They do need consequences for behaviors or symptoms sometimes. So if a kid is kicking a hole in the wall, yeah, the consequence can be that he helps patch the hole. But knowing if it's age appropriate behavior or whether it's a symptom sort of gets to be a thing that you understand when you really get to know the child. And I think parents can do this better because obviously they spend a good amount of time. I think it's harder for teachers. I think it's harder for teachers, particularly at the beginning of the year, because they don't know the kid. So is this typical of his behavior? So a really smart, nice kid is calling somebody stupid. It just doesn't make sense. When I get called in to help with behavioral plans, one of the things I want to do is be curious, and one of the things I do is ask why. Why is this kid calling this kid stupid? Let's try to find out what's going on. It just doesn't make sense. So to me, if it just totally doesn't make any sense, then I look more toward a symptom. If it's an age appropriate thing, then talk to the kid. Is this, did you do that on purpose? And one thing I have found about kids with Tourette is that they have a hard time lying. So lots of times they will tell you whether or not, well, yeah, no, it really wasn't a symptom. But it's hard. If I had the answer to that, I'd have a lot of money.
Okay. So someone said, we had a teacher who just would not get on board with our son's disinhibition. How can we help when we encounter these teachers in the future?
Well, the first thing we would recommend is that you give them a copy of the educator's toolkit, and then ask them or ask somebody that is on board to have a team meeting, and have either Wendy or myself on a phone call. Or we are now teaching people in chapters to do team meetings and to do school presentations. So I think sitting with a person and really discussing it, because disinhibition is difficult. It's hard. But if a teacher really doesn't get it, and some people don't want to get it, unfortunately. So at the beginning of the year, sometimes we've had to change teachers, which is we really don't like doing that. But lots of times, if they can have a conversation with either me or Wendy, that can be helpful. And we also have some videos on our site for disinhibition that can be helpful.
Okay. So someone said, when I tell my son not to do something, he then responds, challenge accepted. I guess that's a pretty obvious sign of disinhibition.
Yeah, I like that. I may I may use that in future presentations. Yeah, when we tell them not to do something, it puts it in their head, and so it makes it more difficult for them to inhibit it. And that just makes sense. I really live on a lot of, what makes sense. And if I tell somebody not to do something, unfortunately, it does put into their head. Challenge accepted. Yeah, that really was him saying that. Yeah, I will. Yeah, disinhibition. He was a smart kid.
So someone else asked, what suggestions do you have for an adult struggling with disinhibition and impulsivity? I have trouble holding down jobs because of it.
Yeah, and you're not alone. It's amazing to me how many adults do have difficulties holding down jobs, and because of this inhibition. I think, um, and again, I wish I had a really good answer for this. I think being honest with people is the best thing, and finding some strategies that can work for you. So if it's hard for you to inhibit, it probably gets harder. I can't say probably. It may get harder and harder as your anxiety rises. So if you can figure out some strategies that you can use to reduce your anxiety during the day, then you may have less symptoms. And if you have less symptoms, you're gonna not need to inhibit as much. But that's a hard one, and I think as there more awareness of Tourette, employers are getting to know a little bit more too. But you're not alone. It's I've known many adults that struggle with that.
Okay. So another question, my son will refuse to take breaks during the school day because he gets so anxious about anything everyone else is doing. He will argue about breaks, escalating the situation, causing even further disruption, and so on. What can they do at school?
A lot of kids don't want to be told it's time to take a break. Um, they may not even want to hear the suggestion that it would be a good idea for you to take a break, because for them it feels like punishment. So if the school can come up with a plan and have the kid involved in developing the plan, so that he sees it not as something that is punishment. It's part of a plan, and so he may go along with it better. But taking breaks, that's a hard one, because a lot of kids feel like it's if they take a break, then it's saying I've got a problem or I'm bad. So what they did with my son, and what a lot of teachers do, is you have envelopes, even blank envelopes. Charlie, this envelope needs to go to the principal's office. Not the principal's office, because that implies punishment. This envelope needs to go down to the nurse, or this envelope needs to go someplace. So just getting up out of the environment and walking sometimes can be a break. But a lot of kids don't like to be told to take a break.
Okay. So when working with children with TS, especially those who are severe, it is often difficult to tell what is tics, what is OCD, what is impulsivity, what is disinhibition. My question is, do you think that you should address all of the symptoms as if they're disinhibition?
Um, I guess a lot of times I just talk about symptoms as a pot full of symptoms. I'm not sure. I mean, doctors need to figure out if it's OCD, and doctors need to figure out if it's attention deficit. Um, but that's because of medication. I think if you're working with kids that are very severe, again, try to come up with plans, whether it's disinhibition, whether it's impulsivity is probably one of the harder ones, because it's the kid isn't going to even be thinking. But coming up with plans with the child to help manage all of those. The OCD is really, really tough, because it's the brain saying that you have to do it and do it and do it and do it, or you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. So if you're working with kids that are very severe, um, talk to them and develop plans. And then the plan may last for a week and then stop working. A lot of kids like charts. So you come up with this plan. Let's try this, Charlie, and chart it, see how it works. Well, see, it's working pretty good. Or no, it's not working at all. Let's have another plan. So I think the more we can work with the kids in developing strategies, the better it's going to be. And I'm not sure that this person may want to contact me.
And your email is kathy.giordano@tourette.org.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so next question. What is your go-to response to skeptical adults? for example, teachers who believe the child can control these behaviors?
Uh, I guess I go back to the why. You know, why? Why would this kid be doing this? And then we hear because he wants attention. Kids with a Tourette get more attention than they really want. Or they'll say, you know, he just likes pushing my buttons. Go to Ross Green. Look at Ross Green's websites. I encourage everybody listening today to go to Ross Green, because you know kids want to be successful. All kids want to be successful. So my go-to response, I guess I don't have a quick go-to response other than, you know, gee, you know, why would he want to do that? And have you talked to him, and have you asked him why he does that?
Okay, so what is the way to share education with the whole classroom about Tourette syndrome? I want my student to feel supported by their whole classroom. I wonder also if it's helpful for the student specifically to continuously explain TS to individual students.
You keep cutting out on me. A teacher wants to know whether it's a good idea to have a class presentation and whether it's a good idea to continue to educate classmates.
Yes.
Yeah, we totally believe that. And a lot of people are hesitant because they think there's going to be more bullying. Kids typically will bully or tease when they don't know why somebody's doing something. Um, Especially starting at an early age, can be very helpful, because once a kid knows that the kid's not doing it to be annoying, there's a lot less bullying and acceptance. And also, it's helpful for the child because if I go into school and I know that I'm going to say these naughty words or do this behavior, and nobody knows why I'm doing it, it's going to increase my anxiety. It's going to make me want to suppress and inhibit more. But if I go to school and I know everybody there knows that I'm going to continue to clear my throat or I'm going to tap my desk. And since they know that, it reduces the anxiety, which reduces the amount of symptoms that actually do occur. So yeah, we really, really support educating people and particularly classmates, so they know what's going on and so that the kid with Tourette knows that they know what's going on.
Okay, another question here. Do you think that most or all of those with TS struggle with disinhibition at some level?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, I'm thinking of my daughter who has very mild Tourette, and I think we all have disinhibition. So that's kind of hard to answer. I wouldn't say everything is Tourette disinhibition, but I think we all do have some disinhibition. I mean, I know if there's a chocolate cake and I am not supposed to eat chocolate, if there is a chocolate chip cookie available, I will have a really hard time inhibiting not eating it. So I think we all have disinhibition somewhat, but it's just, and I think everything about kids with Tourette, kids with Tourette, people with Tourette are normal people. They're typical people with Tourette, and so they have the typical amount of difficulties inhibiting that we all have, but then it's increased by 50. So it's increased like if we go out and drink alcohol, that's going to reduce our ability to inhibit. So we all have difficulties inhibiting, but for people who have different things going on with their brain, they even have a harder time inhibiting. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I'll have to ask my daughter that.
Mhm. Okay, another question we have from a parent. My son hits me almost every day, and it's improved with some medication. We have had a
I'm sorry. You start again.
okay. My son hits me almost every day,
Okay.
and the situation has improved with medication. We've had a lot of support and worked with many doctors, but many people are concerned about the fact that he hits me so often. Is this common?
Is it common? It's much more common than you think. Um, my son and I wrote a book called The Family's Quest for Rhythm. And the reason we wrote it is because I wanted people to know that rage and hitting parents, you're not the only one. When Matthew was little and he would hit me or have rage episodes, I really thought I was the only person in the world that this happened to. So I wouldn't say it's common. I know Kathy Budman estimates that about 25% of the people that she works with do have some rage issues. And hitting, whenever I hear anything about hitting, and I wish I knew this when Matthew was little, um, I think about sensory now. So I think people do things. I think when Matthew was young that he may have hit walls and he may have hit people um, as a sensory response. It also may have been a way to get rid of some of his frustration. So, talk to the kid. He probably doesn't want to hit you. I suspect that he hopefully is remorseful because that will help you. But kind of try different strategies. I mean, people would tell us to give them a boxing, a boxing bag. We had more boxing bags in our house than you want to know. But so, maybe when he comes home, he should have gone and rode his bike or, go out and do something to expel the energy. But it's not uncommon. Um, but it's it's a hard one, and you can't accept it. That's one that you really can't ignore. Punishment's not going to change it. Punishment's not going to change it. But trying to work with them to come up with some kind of strategy.
Okay. So this is both a question and a comment for you. Someone said, I love what you said about how sometimes symptoms seem like behaviors even when in context. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that? I think this is where a lot of my teams get stuck.
Yeah. So I remember there was a kid that the teacher was showing a film, and there was an elephant in the film, and the kid yelled out, "Elephants are fat." That was in context, but it was also disinhibition. Um, the little girl that would say "shut up" every time the teacher said we're going to have a quiz, that was contextual, but it was also disinhibition. We were at a conference years ago, and there was now imagine this, there's like 500 people, most of them with Tourette syndrome, and the speaker did not have a whole lot of hair. And somebody yelled out, "Hey, Baldy." Well, then the whole audience started, "Hey, Baldy, hey, Baldy." So it was contextual, but it was still disinhibition. I hope that answers your question. And again, if you'd like a conversation, text me and we can figure out a time to talk.
Okay, this is going to be our last question. Do reward charts and incentives work for children with disinhibition? Does ABA work for them when they are safe?
Thank you, thank you, thank you for asking this question. No, ABA doesn't work. We need to get away from thinking kids with Tourette are going to respond well to strategies for kids with autism. Punishment charts, all those charts and stickers and all that stuff just adds anxiety. Now sometimes, especially for little kids, charts can be helpful, but on the whole, so if a kid is going to be, so if you can be good 5 days or 4 days in a row, then you'll get a pizza and you'll be able to join us at our pizza party. I've seen that in schools, and so the kid messes up on Tuesday. Now he knows already that he's not going to be able to join the pizza party on Friday. No, I really try to stay away from any kind of charts or consequence, both rewards and punishment. because it's neurological. You can't reward away a neurological symptom. Now, sometimes giving support that the kid likes can encourage them. My son needed to figure out how to do things on his own with some of the stuff. And so if there's encouragement, sometimes it helps the kid to learn a strategy for managing. But on the whole, I really hate those. I don't like charts, reward charts and punishment charts and red light, green light, all that kind of stuff. It only adds to anxiety about a neurological disorder. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, that was a great question. So thank you again for a wonderful presentation and answering all of these great questions, Kathy. You guys all asked some wonderful questions.
Yes.
Definitely reach out to us at support@tourette.org or 1-888-4-Tourette if you would like to speak with us on staff and we can help you further. So this is all the time we have for our conference session. Once the session is closed, you guys will receive a survey of the presentation. We would greatly appreciate it if you can complete it and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the presentation. Additionally, the session will be posted on the TAA's YouTube channel for those who are unable to participate today. We encourage you to reach out to us about the virtual conference or for other ideas and suggestions you may have. The presentation was presented free of charge thanks to our generous donors. If you appreciated this session, we welcome you to support the organization. Visit us at Tourette.org to learn more and donate. On behalf of the Tourette Association, thank you again for joining us and for sticking around throughout all the difficulties and taking the time to view our presentation. Have a great day, everyone.